This is Abigail Idan, a 4-year-old who was kidnapped by Hamas on October 7th after both of her parents were slaughtered in front of her eyes. This is Muhammad Abu Katish, a 17-year-old Palestinian who stabbed a Jewish student in the back last year and therefore trialed and imprisoned by Israel. Muhammad's crime is attempt murder. Abigail's crime is simply being Jewish. Both Abigail and Muhammad were released as part of the previous hostage deal between Israel and Hamas, which took place in November. That deal, mediated by the US, Qatar, and the Egyptians, included the release of 240 Palestinian prisoners in exchange for 81 Israeli hostages, elderly women, mothers, children, and babies, who were all kidnapped from their homes on October 7th. For some reason, the New York Times called this deal an exchange of prisoners, and the CNN chose to widely cover the celebrations of the families of the prisoners as if it was Odysseus returning home. So now that we're expecting another hostage deal, just keep this in mind. All Palestinian prisoners released were arrested for violent acts and attempt to murder Israelis, and yet they all received 3 meals a day in prison, family visits, and access to higher education. On the contrary, the Israeli hostages released are all innocent civilians who were kidnapped from their homes. They haven't seen the light of day since abducted, and they were denied access to Red Cross representatives. They were starved, beaten, and humiliated. Some were tortured, and unfortunately, we know of hostages who were sexually assaulted and raped in captivity. Now ask yourselves, is there any equivalence between these two cases? Because if you can't tell the difference between victims of horrific violence and torture who were kidnapped out of their beds and strollers for doing nothing wrong but being Jewish, and convicted terrorists who were arrested for attempt murder, then I'm sorry to break it to you, but there is something awfully wrong with your integrity and your moral justice. And one last thing. Even if you choose to believe Hamas's propaganda and assume the hostages were treated well, terrorists who brutally kidnap innocent civilians cannot be praised for supposedly taking good care of them. That's absurd. These people should have never been abducted in the first place. So, be real.